Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. And huge thanks to Danielle and Tyler for joining me today as we talk a little about Tyler's piece, I Want Answers. So, Tyler, you want to talk to us a little bit, introduce yourself, talk to us a little bit about your piece and your interaction with the ensemble?
Yeah, okay. So, hi, my name is Tyler Mazone. I'm a composer currently studying at Michigan State University for my master's in composition. And I'll start with how I came across the ensemble. Like it was like some around this time last year, actually, that like I was snooping around on my social media, and then I came across I can't remember if it was sponsored or if someone shared it,
Mhm.
but I saw the blank experiment was looking for scores to play. They were
Mhm.
you guys were looking for things to premiere and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
I was like, oh, cool. So I did some research into the group and found that originally at the time last year it was just a trio. It was
Mhm.
clarinet, oboe, and saxophone at that point. But now, obviously, you have a bassoonist and a harpist, Danielle. Now, so you've kind of expanded since then, which is
Mhm.
really cool to hear about. And I started talking with Drew a little bit, and I decided to write a piece called Mini Personalities. I was like, okay, cool. This sounds like a cool combination for me to try, even though it's people have written for this
Mhm.
combination millions of times before. Like it's a pretty common combination, but I hadn't tried it, so I was like,
Mhm.
oh well, I'll join the bandwagon then. So that's how I came across it. And I
Mhm.
Want Answers is the second piece that I wrote for the blank experiment, which was it's it's, it's the same instrumentation. I just added bassoon,
Mhm.
and something that I found very interesting about that instrumentation is that it's essentially reed quintet without bass clarinet.
Mhm.
So there's no extra bass instrument. So I was like, okay, so I sort of know the reed quintet idiom a little bit.
Mhm.
So I jumped into this knowing that there is no bass clarinet to write for. And the result is it's an interesting ensemble because you have two louder instruments, which is the oboe and the tenor sax, and then the clarinet and bassoon are the like softer instruments.
Mhm.
But the thing is about each pairing is the loud instruments, the oboe and the bassoon are the ones with the more um I'm trying not to say harsh tone, but they have a
Mhm.
more
It just
present
comes
tone,
out
a
more.
more front to their notes and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And
Mhm.
then clarinet and tenor sax are the ones that have the more fluid quality
Mhm.
of each other, because clarinet and sax are very similar in
Mhm.
timbre. So it was an interesting challenge to try and make those opposite combinations work
Mhm.
together. And the result is really interesting.
Mhm.
And I Want Answers is actually a programmatic piece. It's one of my few programmatic pieces for chamber ensemble.
Mhm.
And it's essentially about the one time I was supposed to put dishes in out of the dishwasher. I was supposed to
Mhm.
start the thing up and wash them and take them out and put them away. Just to practice for my apartment here, which I do it all the time.
Mhm.
And then I hadn't done it because I got distracted with other stuff. And then
Mhm.
my dad comes home. He says, "Hey, you didn't put the dishes away. And he wanted answers for why I didn't do
Mhm.
it. And then I gave him that excuse that I just forgot about it, and he didn't like the excuse. So the piece is a
Mhm.
two-parter about the desperation for answers. There's a lot of interaction between the voices in a piece, and it's about that desperation of like, I want answers right now. And then it
Mhm.
progresses into a more slower lament about, I got the answer that I did not want to get.
Mhm.
So that's essentially what the piece is. And playing around with those two ideas, I have been playing around with the two ideas for a couple months before I came up with a title.
Mhm.
But when I came up with a title, that's when I knew, that's when I knew the order. And then that story
Mhm.
happened. And then, oh, yeah, this is the title. It's
Mhm.
perfect for the order that I put the material in. So it was essentially just experimentation of the material within, which is something that I'm trying to improve in my composition, but also the programmatic aspect is kind of a funny aspect to consider.
Mm-hmm.
And now the blank experiment recorded that for a virtual recital, which is going to be coming pretty soon. But you guys can handle all of that announcement.
Yeah, we're super duper excited to perform. We're super excited to perform it. We're super excited to present it to everybody. So I have a few questions about the piece, just out of curiosity. So you mentioned all the programmatic elements in it and how there's or fast section and the slower section of it. Do you imagine are there any characters or anything within that? Like anyone asking like the actual question of like what you were doing and saying that they want answers? Is there a response to that in any kind?
This is more bickering than anything else.
Okay.
This is more bickering about why I didn't do the dishes, like, because you see, there's no one set character, because you can notice in the piece that nobody has a single line by themselves in the fast section. And that's a result of like all the bickering and all the thoughts that are going through your head of like, well, why didn't he do this? And I'm just thinking about, and on the other side, that's me thinking about all the excuses that I could have. And all of these thought processes and bickering is going on at the same time. So there's no really one set character. It's just a lot of different thoughts and a lot of different bickers going through the ensemble at once. And then when we get to the slow section at bar 121, I'm playing more with the hemiolas and stuff like that and the harmony. But these harmonies are very and the rhythms are very disjunct. Like we have a 4/3 figure, like in a bassoon, da 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 da. So it's a very disjunct lament, and it's about I'm conflicted because I got an answer, but I didn't get the answer that I wanted. So the slow section is the characters more my father just lamenting about how the answer wasn't what he wanted, and all the conflicting thoughts. Hence the hemiolas that are going on, like the 3/2s, the 3/4s, and stuff like that. And that's developed towards the end of the slow section. So, and then it dies off quietly, and it's just like, you know what? We're gonna move on with this is unresolved, but we're gonna move on with our lives now.
Yeah, and you also you compare the instrumentation to a reed quintet, which it's very, very similar. And I really do like is you mentioned there's no bass clarinet, so you're missing that second like bass voice, but you have the tenor saxophone there as another low instrument, because most of the time in reed quintet it's alto saxophone and sometimes you have soprano, but very rarely do you see tenor, bari, or some of those lower horns. So I think it works very nicely to balance out like the 2 single reed instruments, 2 double reed instruments, 2 low instruments, 2 high instruments, and like one of each. It does a very good job of just balancing it out.
But also you got to consider that the timbres of the low instruments are opposite and the timbres of the high instruments are opposite. Like I said earlier, it's a very good combination, and I'm probably going to write for it again. Like I wrote a saxophone quartet recently that I might arrange it for this instrumentation because it might work very well because the ranges are already there. The tenor part, just copy it. Yeah, the ranges are already there. So I might write it for this combination just to see how it changes, how their timbres change, because I wrote a different piece for saxophone quartet called Distributions, and that's a pretty homogeneous texture, sax quartet. It's pretty homogeneous. So now I'm gonna probably see what it's like with this combination because the ranges are already there. I just have to copy and paste and maybe do some arranging, because there's some parts in the soprano sax that might not work well for oboe. It's like, there's a low B flat somewhere in the soprano sax, and that won't work for oboe because that's an A flat, and you cannot, no matter how hard Ava tries, she is not going to be able to do that.
You can give it to her. She'll be fine.
I'm sure she appreciates you thinking about it.
But, it's the possibility of this timbre. And it's like, I wonder what would happen if I wrote a piece for this combination plus harp. Because now there's an extra challenge of writing for harp in
Oh, yes.
that sphere, because now you have woodwind instruments that balance each other out, but now you have the harp in there, which is a completely different timbre. So,
So much room for possibility and exploration.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a very good point of like the saxophone quartet, similar like a string quartet. They're all from the same instrument family, so they blend together very nicely. And that's a problem like in reed quintet or really in any mixed chamber music. It's just you have so many different timbres. It's a problem, but it's also a really cool thing, and it's a really cool tool that composers can use. And I absolutely love seeing how composers take our different instruments and kind of combine it to make this one homogeneous piece.
Yeah. But the interesting thing about sax quartet for me is also the saxophone still has some timbral differences in each register. Like I'm making use of that. Like I have some low B's on Barry at piano. Like that's a very different timbre than you're used to, because you're used to the Barry sax just honking out the low A's and stuff. But I experimented with the quieter low range of the Barry sax and the quieter high range of the soprano sax. So like those extremes were good too. And this is something that I did in this piece as well. Like I was experimenting a lot with the lower range of the bassoon and how projected it is and how weighted it is in comparison to like bass clarinet or tenor sax. But the bassoon has a very weighted low register, and that's something I took advantage of in I Want Answers in the slow section to like really represent the darkness of the lament that's going on here, you know?
Yeah. Well, Danielle, do you have any other questions? Or Tyler, do you have anything else you wanted to talk to us about with the piece? Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, awesome. Well, thank you both so much for being here, and thank you all so much for watching. And come back to hear the premiere of Tyler's piece, I Want Answers, for oboe, clarinet, tenor sax, and bassoon. So thank you all.